that literary scholars call High Modernism. It's the period in which empire building was taking place. There was a great sense of optimism and progress at the time. This concept of progress and the march of time that kind of filled that time period. So when you think about historians, you think about the word modern is to indicate a period roughly coinciding with the first half of the 20th century. It's easier to study maybe a group of literary artifacts when we can kind of draw a maybe even somewhat artificial line around them. And, literature is certainly no different than that. And I imagine we could see the same thing in art history, in music, any of the liberal arts where there is a human expression of art. But I would have to say that the feeling in high modernism was, change, hey, we've got modern, we've been rocking the Industrial Revolution. We've got all these, things moving forward. Progress was on the tip of everyone's tongue, and progress was sort of associated with nationalism as well. So, that feeling in Europe was, a feeling of pride and embracing change and moving forward. We come to the period known, and I guess I want to say that time period that precedes, kind of stark modernism is known, it had its own zeitgeist, meaning the spirit of the times. That is that this kind of spirit could be detected in these smaller little segments of artifacts, and also it gave critics this idea that they could assume that progress is somehow, part of this zeitgeist. This is what empowered it, progress. When I used to teach this class in person, I would have us kind of look at the word progress from personal level, personal level, community level, national level, global level, and we can start to see that the word progress starts to break down as we move out into, kind of a more global environment. Anyway, I want to give you, I'm going to give you this whole list. I'm going to give you a little lecture that tells you, and you can click these links yourself and find out more information. So I'm going to give you what feels like a fairly superficial lecture on these concepts that are associated with the modern break. Okay, so a break from the zeitgeist that was occurring, a break from this concept of progress and how inspirational it's going to be. All right, so right around 1900 is the dividing line, according to literary critics and other critics that measure time in the arts. We could say that, already there were much, happening in society, on a very large level. But I want to talk about why critics see 1900 as a dividing line. And I want to show you how these energies, to use lack of a better term, are really crucial to the understanding of why the writers of fiction were doing what they were doing. All right, so I want to start out with, if you think about the year 1900, right, we say the beginning of a new century. During that time period, and you can look at these and find out, exact dates, but, right preceding or right around 1900, we have Max Planck's quantum theory, which is so fundamental to nuclear physics. So we've got, new theories coming out. We have Mendel's groundbreaking work on heredity. It's rediscovered, this theories. What is heredity? Queen Victoria died after a near century lifespan. I mean, we don't really know how much a matriarch means, say, in the world of the royals, but that kind of left an impact on society when their queen, who had, lived to be, she didn't rule that long, obviously, but she had a very long rule. So losing your queen in 1900 is rough too. So we've got the loss of Queen Victoria, which sort of disrupted things. We have the introduction of Karl Marx's Das Kapital, which seemed to bring light to the ideas of revolution toward the struggle between the capitalist middle class and the proletariat. So we have kind of the sense of the triumph of the worker going on. We also have Charles Darwin's influence still circulating from his publication of Origin and the Species. By now, it has been, it's been in publication for a number of years, and it has heavily impacted society. What it did, it seemed to remove mind from human history and placing maybe humans in the animal world, sort of in the grips of these determinative forces, not of reason, but of brute survival. And so when we think about the origin of the species, is sort of saying that no longer is nature a reflection of God, but perhaps a reflection of man and man's knowledge. So that was a huge switch over. We also had our philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche published The Birth of Tragedy, where he started to really rattle the readers with faith in ordinary cause and effect, and effect in any kind of duality is really shaken. So we need our philosophers to question the way we think. And that's why they're really important. They maybe don't cure cancer, but they get human beings to think about their thinking. Also, during this time period in 1899, the publication of Freud's interpretation of dreams. Oh my gosh, it is, I just can't say enough how much Freud's work inspired the literary world. All of a sudden, he created a new model of human personality, which is itself is complex, multi-layered, and governed largely by irrational and unconscious survival mechanisms. So he also kind of gave us the permission to embrace the unconscious. This is where stream of consciousness writing comes in. No longer are we supposed to censor our thinking and censor our work, but that we can tap into the unconscious to reach ideas that we couldn't get kind of in our conscious mind. So Freud absolutely influencing, particularly when we get down to On the Road. Couldn't think for a second. And Jack Kerouac's almost continuous stream of consciousness writing. All right, so that's entering the literary world. We come up to this turn of the century, 1899 to 1900. So there's always a feeling, it's in America, particularly, that at the end of an age, that there's this kind of, oh my God, what comes next? For example, when it was going to change from 1999 to the year 2000, maybe you guys heard about Y2K, and the computers weren't savvy enough to figure out how to use binary, in the banking when we changed from 1999 to the year 2000, and it was, touted to be going to be a really disastrous transition that don't fly on that day because the air traffic controllers' computers are all going to crash. And so there was this feeling, that at the end of an age, we kind of have this strange feeling of, yay, it's the end of an era, and holy crap, it's the end of an era. What is coming next? So the fin de siècle means the end of an age. All right. So, what happens psychologically to groups at the end of an age? That would make an incredibly interesting study in and of itself. So that was occurring, the turn of the century, the end of an age. All right. Just kind of people feeling edgy just as a result of that. We come in also add a new complexity called the new woman. So I'd love for you to read this. Whenever women's lives change, it impacts everyone, especially men. So as women became more conscious of their power and mobility, they started to come into an era of influence. And this was unsettling to a society that had largely wanted women to stay safe in their own little, in their own little soft worlds, and that they could just, live. Maybe it was a good thing in some ways, let's not trouble the women with all the horrors of the world. but it also treated women childlike in that sense. So we have a complexity called the new woman that starts to, um, interrupt, if we will, the literary world. Uh, Occurring in the same century, there's something called the Great Exposition in Paris in 1900. I would love for you to just click these links, spend a few minutes and get to know what what was going on during this time period. The Great Exposition, the end result of it is that people felt almost overwhelmed by the rate and vastness of the representation of progress. It'd be like they went to this fair, this Great Exposition, and the most frightening, technology was there. And you went to it thinking, oh my God, look at how brilliant we are, and look what people can do. And you went away from it going, oh my God, look what people can do. And so there was a certain amount of feeling overwhelmed that things were going to go out of control. Also, the notion of progress was deeply embedded in industrialism. So industrialism isn't just the Industrial Revolution, that I don't think of them as the same. Industrialism is more, the first mass transit, all right? The first telegraph, the first alarm clocks, which would then all of a sudden start to demarcate labor. Right? Instead of living by the sun, we now have alarm clocks, and we can rationalize work hours, as well as publications of newspapers and magazines were read by the masses. See, this is kind of the concept of mass industrialism. So that caused literacy to spread beyond the leisure classes, meaning the people who had the time and money to learn to read and enjoy reading and take the time reading. It then spread into the masses with the printing press, so that we had more and more people in the reading public. I think when I mentioned in Joseph Conrad lecture that The Heart of Darkness was first published in serial form, meaning it had kind of episodes that people looked forward to. So, and Mark Twain did the same thing with his writings. He was a serial writer as well. So, a lot of these books that we think of as books were actually written in maybe chapters or episodes, so that the mass audience could kind of get their fix. They were really getting into, regular, regular meals of written work. I wanted to bring attention to this time period and all the energy that was being generated through all of these things. Things in science and physics and in this economy or capitalism or Darwin. Look at all these different energies colliding in the same time period. And what is going to come out the other side is the modern novel. The modern novel is really largely going to be birthed during this period of this zeitgeist